So before I jump into today's video, I'm just going to introduce my co-host for those of you who are not familiar with my channel. My co-host is a Chihuahua. You will probably hear a snoring noise in the background because every time I start to record a video, she decides that's snuggle time. So she snuggles in, goes to sleep and starts snoring. So I will just offer that explanation first. Now in today's video, I want to dig deeper into the whole storage unit story. And there's a few different angles to this that have just got me kind of curious. And to me, they don't shine a good light on Chris Sterns. And I will explain that as I go along. Now, I think the easiest way to approach this is to listen to the audio first and then go over the documents. And then there is another little bit of audio that I do want to listen to at the end, which is from when it is that May phone call between Stephan and his parents. And I'll explain why I want to look at that at the end as well. Now, in terms of the audio that I'm going to go through, I will keep it fairly brief in terms of I will play each bit of audio and just do a quick explanation or recap with each of those audio, and then I'll tie it all together when I get to the documents. The reason for that being is that I've actually covered this in several videos already, so I will limit commentary to basically highlighting what was said in relation to the storage units. So the audio is in consecutive order, so let's jump in and have a listen.
I'm just going to shoot you straight out of respect for you and everything else.
Appreciate it.
There's a storage unit down there.
Yeah, I have a storage unit.
You have a storage unit. Is that your son's storage unit,
No,
or is
it's
that
mine.
that's your storage unit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does he have access to it?
No, I have the keys.
Okay. Were you aware that did your son come visit you on Monday morning?
This Monday?
Yeah.
No, he
the day
left
she
Sunday.
disappeared. Okay.
He left Sunday.
No, go ahead. Evan. Yeah.
So something that I think is important to pay attention to throughout the different recordings is the way the keys or key are referred to. So initially here, they're questioning him about the storage unit. They're questioning him about if Stephan has access to the storage unit. And Chris says, no, I have the keys, plural. He's saying he has both keys. And there is more on that, and yet this seems to have been overlooked.
But there's a storage unit, but he wouldn't have access to the keys to the storage unit because I have the only key to it. And that would have been locked in my car, and he would have had to come in my room, which he didn't have a key to get into.
Okay, and here's where it starts to become a little confusing, because he says again he wouldn't have access to the keys, plural. Then he says, because I have the only key and I keep it in my console. So he's gone from there being two keys to him keeping a key in his car. But here's the thing that has been missed by so many people, and which I'm surprised wasn't questioned more.
He doesn't have a key. He took Jen's key. Room. It's in my console.
Can she check and make sure the key's there?
What? Well, is the key in the basket?
Now, part of that has been redacted, which is a bit of a pain, but when you listen to it, something is said that is redacted, and then the officer says, can you ask her if the key is there? And he asks Deb to check for the key in the basket. Now, he's just said that he has a key in the console of his car. But then now he's saying check for the key in the basket. And that's not a mistake, because listen to what is said next.
Well, go look at the key in the basket.
The key in the console is in this car that you're driving up?
Hang on a second. What?
You said the key in the console is in this
My car? Yeah, it's only one key.
This car out here?
Yeah. Do I need to go look?
Yeah, let's go see what's in there.
Yes, so she can look for the key in the house, we can look for the key in the car.
So the conversation continues along the lines of he's asking her to go and look and see if it's in the basket. And the officer is saying, okay, so she'll go look for the key in the house and you'll go look for the key in the car. So clearly the conversation that has occurred here is that there are two keys and they know exactly where the keys are meant to be. There's meant to be one in a basket in the house, not missing, but in a basket in the house, and the other one is kept in Chris Sterns' car.
Yeah, right there.
And that's the only key you
That's the
have
only
to
key.
the storage unit?
Yeah. There's supposed to be two keys, but I haven't seen that key.
Is his name on the storage unit at all?
No, it's mine.
Like he can't show up and say, hey, I lost my key, can you give me access to...
No.
So some of the conversation as they go to Chris Sterns' car to look for the key is kind of lost because they're outside and obviously the recording is not picking up properly. But suddenly it's gone from, look, here's the key in the car, and is this the only key you've got? Yes, this is the only key I've got. He starts to say he hasn't seen the other key in. Unfortunately, the officer interrupts him, so we don't hear what he was just about to say in terms of when he last saw the other key. But he does come back to that.
That storage unit is
I was there a couple of weeks ago pulling out some tax boxes. There's not that much room in there. I mean, you could stash a body if you wanted to, if that's the case. But like I said, as far as I know, I have the only key. I don't know if there were two keys issued, and I haven't seen the other key for well over a year. So,
is there a chance that he has that key?
Yeah, I would say
there's always a chance.
There
right?
could be a chance because he's stolen from us,
Okay.
and why he would want it is beyond me, because all his stuff is that he has, guitar or what have you, is stuck in the very back, and he didn't want that. But I've ended up trying to clean out our garage, and I stuck all the other stuff there.
So now we've completely forgotten about the key that should be in the basket, and he's saying that he, as far as he knows, he's got the only key, and that he hasn't seen the other key in over a year. So the story's actually changed here, and I find that really interesting. But then he talks about actually within the storage unit, he says there's not much room there. And he talks about Stephan's stuff being stuck up the back. To me, stuck up the back infers that you can't get to it. And there is more on that shortly. Now, this is the first time when the officer directly asks him, is it possible that Stephan could have a key for the storage unit? And Chris is quite happy to go along with that. Yes, well, he has stolen from us. Now, there's one or two things happening here. Either Chris knows that Stephan accessed the house and he knows whether or not Stephan actually got into the storage unit, and there's more on that in my previous video, so I highly recommend listening to that. In that video I broke it down a little bit more, and I did highlight the fact that there is actually on record, with the latest lot of documents, it specifically says that the FBI actually recorded that Stephan attempted to or did log into Google at the Sterns' residence that morning at Northport when he drove down there in the middle of the night. So we know that he did actually go into the house. There's also more stuff that shows us that he actually didn't access the storage unit. In my previous video, I suggested that Chris was aware of all this. So what I'm wondering here is Chris genuinely unaware of what's going on and thinks that maybe Stephan has accessed the storage unit, or have they just given him a convenient distraction from the fact that Stephan did actually go to the house?
Your code was used this morning to access the property, the storage property. Your keypad code. I have Northport PD in front of your storage unit. I know we're in a kind of a weird situation. Are you all right if they end up breaking the lock to get in there to make sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Alex, I
just heard it. He just asked Mr. Sterns if he was okay with us breaking that lock.
He accessed the keypad.
He told him we were here. Somebody accessed.
We're working with management down there.
Said yes. Are you okay?
And this is statewide news. This is huge news.
Yep.
So a lot of people are going above and beyond helping us.
Now, with all that background noise, it's a little bit of a struggle to catch exactly what Chris says there. Also because his voice suddenly goes really high up. So to me, he sounds genuinely surprised that they are suggesting that his code was used to access the storage unit that morning. This is the one and only time in relation to all this that he does sound genuinely surprised. And then when they ask him for access, he's like, yeah, sure. Now, I'm wondering if at this point in time he's genuinely surprised because perhaps there had been a discussion in terms of Stephan accessing the house, and there was nothing said in that discussion about Stephan going to the storage unit. So perhaps Stephan has actually, in Chris's mind, Stephan has actually gone away from the plan that had been made. We do later discover that the storage unit wasn't accessed, so I find it quite interesting that in terms of when they talk about Stephan being near the house, Chris doesn't sound overly surprised, and yet where they're talking about him possibly accessing the storage unit here, he does sound surprised.
I didn't even know he had the key. Okay. I don't know how he would have gotten the keypad.
It's interesting.
So here he's saying he doesn't know how Stephan could have gotten the keypad, as in the keypad code. So he still sounds kind of surprised here. And once again, we know, and we'll hear this later on in the video, we know that Stephan did not access that storage unit. So, like I said, it is quite interesting that right now, Chris Sterns is quite surprised. He's not pushing any narrative here. And yet, over the course of more discussions, and over the course of this interview as well, of course, things change. So let's keep listening.
Your code was entered to enter the property this morning.
And what time was that at? 9.
And your wife, by chance, wouldn't have went to the storage unit? She wouldn't even know where it is.
And Jen was with you this whole time, right? So.
Well, wait. When I don't know where Jen was until she called me at 11.
Okay. At 11.
And she said, "Hey, Stephan's not here. Is he with you?"
Okay.
So at this point in time, they believe that Chris's code was used to access the storage facility at around about 9 o'clock that morning. And when they ask him, does Deb have a code or access to the storage unit, he's like, no, he doesn't even think that she knows where it is. So here we're hearing that Deb doesn't know where the storage unit is. Clearly, she's never been there. So this is interesting that at this point in time, it's interesting because it actually makes it sound like Stephan has accessed the storage unit. Now, it's from this point that it sounds like Chris is either trying to convince himself or convince the officers that Stephan must have had access to the storage unit, that he must have that spare key, must know the keypad, and had gotten into the storage unit.
Would it be safe to say and accurate that your son had no rights to this storage unit at all?
If he asked my permission, I would allow it.
Did he ever ask your permission?
No.
Okay.
And again, like I said, I've been missing this key for, how long have I had this? Maybe I've had this key for maybe 18 months.
Okay.
So now we've gone from the key being in a basket at their house to being gone for over 12 months to being gone for over 18 months. So here we are establishing that there is definitely a missing key, and Chris Sterns has no idea where that key has gotten to. Now, I just want to point something out. This guy is extremely anal normally. And to me, it seems that he's not the sort of person that would mislay a key for a storage unit. I think he would know where both keys are at all times, and if one has gone missing, I would imagine that he would have, in fact, asked Stephan about that key, given that Stephan had stuff in the back of the storage unit. So, to me, that basically raises a bit of a red flag. This guy is so on top of everything else, and yet apparently he doesn't know where this storage key is, and he doesn't even know how long it's been missing for.
Does your wife ever go to the storage unit?
Does she what?
Ever go to the storage unit?
No. No, she's never been to that storage unit.
How does he know the code to your code to the storage unit? Is it written down somewhere?
No. So I was thinking about that earlier. So there's another incident here. So I get a call from the storage unit 2 or 3 weeks ago telling me that they were running an audit of the units because there was going to be an inspection or something, and my unit wasn't properly locked. So the way it works is that you've got this slide mechanism, unlock it and then unbolt it from the hinge, and then you have to push it back and secure it in one of the 2 holes. And they said it wasn't properly locked, and they had flagged it, and I needed to get over there and fix it. So I went over there, opened it up, looked at it, everything's fine, and then locked it properly. And I'm going to say maybe there's a 50-50 chance I did that, but I'm pretty anal about it. And so I don't know.
A 50-50 chance you did what? What do you mean?
Pardon?
A 50-50 chance you did what?
I may not have locked it properly, or maybe now that I'm aware that he possibly had a key to it, that he went into the unit.
Okay.
But nothing out of the ordinary.
Has he ever gone to the unit to help you with something and you get?
Oh, he's helped me load it up, yeah.
Now, I've noticed that when Chris Sterns is asked a direct question that he wants to avoid, he does what so many people do when they are trying to avoid the truth. He over-explains. The question was simple. Is it possible that he could have got the code somehow? Chris Sterns goes into a really, really long-winded explanation of how a few weeks ago the storage facility discovered that his unit wasn't locked properly, and he thinks there's only a 50% chance of him actually not having locked it properly, but he says himself that he's so anal that he surely would have done so. And they're like, well, is it possible that Stephan could have got, or has Stephan been to the unit with you before? And he's like, yes. So, to me, and we know this, when someone over-explains something, and when they go off at a tangent, because he's over-explaining, but he's not over-explaining the question that they asked him. So, to me, that's really, really interesting. And then he does say, well, yes, he could have seen the access code.
Oh, okay. So So he could have the
Well,
code for that.
Maybe he observed me punch it in the code,
Okay.
which is pretty devious on his part.
Yeah.
I mean,
So now he's gone to, maybe he saw me put in the code. Maybe he's memorised the code, which is pretty devious on his part. He doesn't here sound like he thinks that's something which Stephan would do, almost. You would expect, given the other things he said, would be, well, yeah, it's probably likely that he's done that because that's the sort of thing he does, because he steals from us, he does all these things. But no, well, that would be pretty devious on his part. Almost like, well, would he really do that? Maybe I'm misinterpreting that. Let me know what you think, what your take on that is. But I just find it really interesting that this man, who is supposedly super anal, has apparently lost a key, when I would have expected him to know exactly where those keys are. And then to believe that his son saw him put in the code. Now, given that he says he clearly doesn't trust his son, and he knows that his son is a thief, would you, if your son was like that, would you perhaps cover your hand as you put in the code to get into the storage unit if your son was in the vehicle with you? Maybe, maybe not. We could never know that. But it's just interesting that this man, who is so anal, has apparently, according to him, made it so easy for his son to access this storage unit.
and then Alex is telling me, well, we have information that he went to your storage unit. So that led us down a rabbit hole, and then I found out that was completely wrong. That access storage facility had been accessed for 2 weeks, and that was me going to put the lock back on that I had incorrectly relocked my unit 2 weeks ago, now almost 3 weeks ago. So that was wrong. The time of his entering Northport was wrong. It was really an hour earlier, hour and 15 minutes earlier, and he never went access the storage unit. So I'm sitting there thinking, well, he must have been really disappointed if he was coming to this house because he couldn't get in the front door.
So this is from the interview on March the 3rd, and it's important that we remember that because I'll come back to that at a later point. But at this point in time, he knows that Stephan did not access the storage unit. He's been told by Northport PD that Stephan did not access the storage unit and that Northport PD had made a mistake with the codes. The code wasn't used. He's also pointing out that because the time that he knows, the time that he was given in terms of Stephan being in Northport was the 7:46 time. So they haven't actually told him both times that he was caught on camera, because he was also caught around 6:30. So they've told him the 7:46 time, and he's basically saying, well, that was an hour and a quarter before the code for the storage unit was put in, so no, he couldn't possibly have gotten into the storage unit. So here he is accepting what he's been told, that Stephan couldn't possibly have gotten into the storage unit, and also using logic there, saying, and we know that because the time doesn't match up with when he was on camera near the house. Now, this is really, really interesting because he doesn't stick with this.
And you're saying that your code to the storage facility was not used on that Tuesday?
No, the storage unit, Northport Police told me was, they misread it, but they said the last access, because I didn't think Stephan had my access code unless when we were there in December, he decided to memorize it. And I keep it in my contacts, because obviously I don't use it that often. I'm not going to commit to memory. But I was there 2 weeks ago because they called me up and said, hey, we're doing an audit, we got an audit that's going to happen, and we check all the units, and you didn't lock your unit properly. So, it's just slided over, bolted, and then it's got 2 holes. You drop your padlock in there, lock it. Well, apparently I locked it on the outside. I didn't think I did, but anyway, I must have. So I went over there the next day and properly locked it.
So on one hand, he's confirming here that Northport have said to him, no, Stephan did not access the storage unit. But at the same time, he's clinging to the narrative that Stephan may have actually got the code for the storage unit off him around Christmas time, and that it's possible that Stephan may have actually gone to the storage unit at some point in time and not locked it properly because Chris had to go there and lock it himself. Now, the fact that he brings that story up twice about the storage unit not being sufficiently locked, the fact that he mentions a few times about Stephan possibly watching him or, learning the code, says to me that he's not going to let go of this narrative easily. He knows. I mean, this guy is really, really slick usually. He picks up on things pretty quickly, and yet he seems to be confused here. On one hand, he's saying, well, Northport PD are clear that he did not access the storage unit, but then he's still going on with the narrative that would support the possibility of Stephan getting into the storage unit. I find this really, really interesting. I can't think of any other instances throughout the interviews with Chris Sterns where he becomes confused over facts. He comes across to me as someone with a really sharp mind who does analyse things. You listen to all the things he says. He's pretty sharp. So why is he suddenly confusing facts here when he's been told with utter certainty, no, Stephan didn't access the storage unit?
I do want to touch that. When Northport was here, apparently they were given a computer.
I gave him a computer.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there was a desktop computer sitting here, tower. And I told Alex, I said, hey, it's got a tower unit here, desktop. I said, you guys want it? And they said, yeah, we'll probably do that. And so, again, I reminded Northport Police that it was here, so I gave it to them.
So here he's referring to the tower that was in Stephan's room. So this is a gaming tower, and he has said at other points that Stephan was on it immediately before leaving to go to Kissimmee on the Sunday that Maddie went missing. So we keep that in mind. So this computer he's referring to is the one from Stephan's room.
I know you touched on it earlier, but you said Stephan didn't have, that to your knowledge, Stephan didn't have access to your storage unit.
No.
To my what?
To your knowledge.
No, to my storage unit, no.
Who all has access to it? Just you?
Just me.
I don't even have a key to it.
And when I ask access, is it a code to get into the secured gate and then a padlock?
Yes.
Okay. And only you have those codes?
I have the code. It's in my phone as a contact record.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I know, he didn't have that code. Now, I am missing a key and have been missing the second key for over a year. So when they first started telling me about he came down to access the unit, I started thinking, well, that explains where the other key is then. But I could have lost it, but I have no idea where the key is. And the only way to know whether or not anybody else accessed that is if the storage unit printed out it. Mm-hmm. And because I don't access it that often.
So this is still the interview on the 3rd of March, or the early March interview. And you can see he's not willing to let go of the notion that Stephan's probably got the spare key. And he's been asked about, could Stephan have accessed it? And even though he's already been like, no, well, Northport said that it hadn't been accessed, now he's inferring, well, you couldn't know unless you printed out the paperwork to show when the storage unit had been accessed, and I don't access it very often. So he's going back here to the narrative of Stephan possibly accessing the storage unit, which is really interesting. Like I said, this guy is normally really sharp, and yet he's supposedly lost track of a key when he's supposed to be Mr. Super Anal, and he's also supposedly confused, even though he knows for certain that the storage unit wasn't accessed that morning. He's still going back to the narrative of Stephan having the key.
So I was here the morning that the storage unit was searched. Is there anything of like tremendous value in there? I know there's a bunch of bins, and I see a few suitcases and stuff like that.
Yeah, just overflow from the garage.
Some Christmas
I was going to go over and look to see if anything had been moved, because I couldn't imagine Stephan going in there. There should have been a bunch of dog crates piled up, and it's packed, other than just a small section between the bulk stuff and the racks that I have there where I have access
on the right.
He did have some boxes of his stuff. But
Yes, but it's way so far back that he would have to empty the whole storage unit out to get it.
Okay.
Back in the left-hand corner. It's well, that's too much work. He wouldn't be willing to do that much work.
Okay, so first of all, before I go on with that, I've been doing a bit of digging and trying to find out if there are photos from the search of the storage unit. So if you've seen where they've been shared by another content creator, can you let me know so I can go have a look at them? And I'll explain why later on in this video, because I think they are important. Also, the images from Stephan Sterns' room at Northport, if you're aware that anyone has them, let me know, because I'd also like to access them. But let's get back to it. So his description of the storage unit here, he's essentially setting up the narrative here that Stephan couldn't possibly get to his stuff at the back of the storage unit. He would have to remove a bunch of stuff to do so, and he'd be too lazy to do that. And also bear in mind that the codes that were original, or the time that was originally given for the code, was only a 10-minute time frame. But, like I said, we know that the unit was never accessed by Stephan. They've made it pretty clear in the documents that that they misread the codes and that nobody accessed the storage unit. And they've told Chris Sterns as much. He knows this when he's doing this interview. And yet he's still speculating about the possibility of Stephan using that storage unit, accessing that storage unit, possibly getting to his things in the back of it, or possibly hiding something in there. He's talking about, I've thought about going there to have a look for myself to see if anything is disturbed. I mean, the guy's like a dog with a bone. I don't know if maybe this is just the first sign of dementia, and for some reason his brain just keeps going back to the initial story of they think that Stephan went to the storage unit, or whether he is actually trying to set up a narrative here to distract from the fact that Stephan went to the house. I honestly believe from listening to his other conversations that what he's doing here is trying to distract from the fact that Stephan went to the house. This actually makes sense to me, and I've explained all that in detail in my previous video, so I'll leave a link for that below, so that if you haven't seen it and you want to go and get more detailed information as to why I'm suggesting that Chris Sterns knew that Stephan was at the house, then you can click on that link and go and check out that video. Okay, so now we're skipping ahead to July. This was the interview when Chris basically went to Kissimmee to, it seemed to me that he was fishing for information. So this is where he made the trip of his own accord. He requested this interview, and this is the conversation, or part of the conversation, that occurred at that time.
There was, the thumb drive that you provided.
Was okay, so there was stuff off of
So
that.
there, I can tell you there was a. So identifying those individuals, it'd be almost nearly impossible.
30,000?
Yes, sir.
What about the hard drive?
The hard drive was not used when the forensics unit got it. I don't think it was used since like 2020 or something like that.
Well, why did he go to the extent of hiding the damn thing? Because like I said, he was on that computer Sunday morning, and then I assumed when I handed it over that it was...
So the desktop that you handed us,
Yep.
there was not a hard drive in it.
Right, and then that surprised me. And then when I went to move out of the storage unit, it was at a location at the back. And if you've seen photos, there was a rack of shelves. And
Yeah, I was there that night when we did this.
okay, so you could easily slide back to the rear of that, and from where it was, you could easily tuck in where I found the hard drive. You could easily just placed it.
Right.
So I don't know if he.
But yeah, there was no activity on the hard drive for years.
Okay, so he seems at this point in time determined to continue with the narrative of the hard drive being hidden in the storage unit, even though he's discovering here that they know that the hard drive wasn't accessed since 2020. But what's really interesting here is that they say to him, this is the first time he hears it, they say, the hard drive that you gave, the computer that you gave us didn't have a hard drive. And he goes, right. He's confirming that. It's the first time he's heard it. Not, sorry, it didn't have a hard drive. How's that possible? See, the thing is, when he gave them that computer from the house, he already knew that Stephan hadn't accessed the storage unit. And then he goes to them with this hard drive that he found in the storage unit, even though he knows that Stephan didn't access the storage unit. So he should actually know that the hard drive he gave them was not the hard drive from the tower in the first place. So when they're telling him that there was no hard drive in that tower, he should have been surprised by it. But he wasn't surprised. He should have. I mean, like I said, this guy is pretty sharp. Surely, in his mind, he should have seen the computer as being completely separate from the hard drive that he says he discovered in the storage unit. And yet, he seems to accept them saying there was no hard drive, and seems to accept that that's what he found in the storage unit. But the way he says, like when they say there was no hard drive, he says, right, and pauses and goes, and that surprised me. When did that surprise him? Because this is the first time he's being told that there was no hard drive in that computer. So it sounds to me that he has actually handed over that tower knowing there was no hard drive in it. So it's still confusing, because he also knows that Stephan didn't access the storage unit. So did he hand over the hard drive, the tower, knowing there was no hard drive, and then get this other hard drive from somewhere, thinking that this would then stop them from worrying about the hard drive that was missing from the tower, because he knew the hard drive was missing? Or did Stephan even tell him before he was arrested that he was removing the hard drive from that computer? Is that why Stephan went down to Northport? Because he had finished whatever it was he was doing connected to their internet 16 minutes before he was then caught on camera again leaving Northport. That would be enough time to undo the back of the tower, pull out the hard drive and take it with you. I think it is really odd what is going on here. To me, it seems that Chris should be way sharper than what he is appearing right here. This is a guy who was like, well, you know, I thought it was extremely suspicious that he got a flat tire. And yet now he's getting confused about hard drives. And he's forgetting that Stephan didn't access that storage unit. He's discounting the fact that Stephan was on the computer before he left Northport that day.
Huh.
So we don't know where the hard drive on the computer that he was using when you said you saw him using the computer, where that hard drive is.
Oh, this isn't the same hard drive?
No.
Oh.
Because if he was using it that morning,
yeah,
we would have been able to tell through the forensics dump.
Right.
And no, it hasn't been used since, I want to say like 2020 maybe.
Okay, so it was an assumption on my part that was the same hard drive. But I don't know how he put that hard drive in it, and I don't know how he put that in there.
So his narrative of him having retrieved this hard drive from the storage unit has just been blown to smithereens. They've just said the hard drive from the storage unit is not the hard drive from the tower. Two different things. That one from the storage unit hasn't been accessed since 2020. What does that mean? That's basically confirmation that that hard drive hasn't got anything to do with the case. Unless, of course, it has other images on it that are predate 2020. But it is confirming that it was not stashed by Stephan in the storage unit when he went down to Northport. Which, don't forget, Chris knows this already because he's been told unequivocally that the storage unit actually wasn't accessed. But they've just blown his whole narrative to smithereens, and instead of just throwing the narrative away, he goes back to, but I don't know how he put that in there. So it's like he's stuck on his narrative and he can't adapt, which I find is really, really interesting. Because it seems like he's been quite determined to stick to this narrative of Stephan accessing the storage unit. He's given them a hard drive that he claims that he found in the storage unit. And then they blow his narrative to smithereens by saying, no, that's not the hard drive from the computer, which he shouldn't have known was missing in the first place. And it just completely throws him completely off kilter. He doesn't know where to go with his narrative from there.
So he must have just destroyed the thing.
Hey.
It would have made best sense to do that for sure, but too bad he wasn't smart enough about the phone. Not that I would be encouraging that, but still. But again, can't figure out why he went down to Northport, because by the time he would have arrived, would have put him at past 6 o'clock. And
well, we know exactly what time he was. Once again, I don't remember what time it was, but we can put them within less than a mile from your house through dash cam video from Northport PD that was working a crash showed him in the car at that point. So we know exactly what time he was there, but what time he came back, I don't remember what time it was.
Okay.
Now, they've just established with this guy that the hard drive for the computer that his son was apparently using just before he left Northport has been removed. And yet he's saying, well, I don't know why he went down to Northport. And that is coming directly off the conversation about the hard drive, which to me suggests that that is the first thing in his mind. The whole narrative of his son getting into the storage unit has just been completely smashed to smithereens, and he's struggling to come up with a new narrative to hide the fact that his son accessed the house. So he goes, well, I don't know why he came down to Northport, even though they have essentially just told him precisely why his son went down to Northport. The hard drive from his computer was removed. Either Stephan Sterns accessed the house and removed the hard drive before returning to Kissimmee, or after Stephan was arrested, Deb or Chris removed the hard drive. I can't see them doing that. And we know that Stephan was in the house. We have, in the documents specifically, it says that he was in the house and he was trying to access Google. So he was on that computer before he left. Chris must know this. To me, given how sharp he is normally, him being essentially told that his son has been a mile from the house, and they know exactly when his son was seen, but they're not telling him, note that. So he's like, I don't know why he went down to Northport then. And they're like telling him, well, we have him, and he's trying to gauge times. And to me, I think he's trying to figure out if they know when he was there. And they say we know precisely when he was there, but then they're like, but I can't remember right now. So they're being very careful not to tell Chris the actual times for when Stephan was caught on camera less than a mile from the house. But Chris Sterns should be able to put all that together and know for certain that his son entered the house, took that hard drive and disposed of it. He's even saying here, well, he must have disposed of it then, which makes sense. How did he dispose of it, Chris? He could only dispose of it if he had actually removed it and entered the house, meaning Chris knows well and good that his son was in the house. Why is he trying to hide that fact? Why is he trying to avoid discussing that fact?
Did you ever confirm that he went to the storage unit?
The records from the storage unit were kind of wishy-washy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it looked like somebody used your access code, but when we talked to him again, they said the dates and times, they may have been mistaken. So whether he was there or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, it's really interesting that he then questions, do you know if he did go to the storage unit? Because he's been told unequivocally that no, he didn't go to the storage unit, it was all wrong. And what I find interesting is that the detective he's talking to is, he doesn't give him a direct answer. He goes, it's a bit wishy-washy. It's clear in the documents that they know that the storage unit wasn't accessed. So I think they are also having questions about Chris Sterns. Bear in mind that the morning that Stephan Sterns went down to Northport, accessed the house and, as it appears, removed the hard drive, him and Chris Sterns returned to the hotel within 5 minutes of each other, and yet Chris Sterns told law enforcement that Stephan arrived half an hour after him. There's a lot of things here that just make Chris look really bad. Now, I'm going to move on to look at the documents to show you timeframes and where things are confirmed. Now, I won't read all this verbatim because we've heard it in the interviews already. But in the first paragraph, it refers to Chris contacting Northport Police saying that he's found the computer tower in Stephan's room and that he is worried that it may have more evidence on it, and it talks about Northport collecting it, and then it was being transferred to Kissimmee Police Department. Then in the subsequent paragraph, it mentions that the hard drive, that the tower had no hard drive, and that Chris says that he saw Stephan using the computer on the date. Now, this is inaccurate. We've heard it in the interviews. Chris specifically says that Chris actually stated that he saw Stephan using the computer the same day, just before he left to go to Kissimmee. Now, I'm not sure if this is a report from Kissimmee or Northport, but I've noticed a few issues where it seems that reports have been miswritten. So that's something worth bearing in notice going through these documents, that there are mistakes in these documents. The third paragraph addresses the hard drive and the USBs that Chris claims to have found. So saying that the hard drive was located in the storage unit, the USBs in the house. Here they're making a comment, Stephan was in the area of 1001 Executive Drive, Northport, which is the location of the storage unit. However, we know that that's irrelevant because we know from multiple sources that he did not access the storage unit. And there's also the time issue when it comes to the storage unit, which I'll show you when we get to that part in the documents. So I just did a quick map for you to show you what they were referring to. I've added my own pins because trying to do it in Google meant that when I tried to pin these locations in Google, it actually gave the addresses. And while I'm happy to share a map with you, I don't want to go as far as to dox the Sternses by giving you their physical address of their house, camera footage, etc. I've given you the address of the storage unit because, according to accounts by Chris Sterns, he doesn't even have the storage unit there anymore. And also it wouldn't be hard to locate a storage unit close to their house. So they're the locations, bearing in mind that the camera footage is apparently about a mile from the house. So the storage unit would be probably a little bit more than a mile from where the camera footage was taken. But then it's a direct hit straight down the highway. So it would be easy to access. And it certainly wouldn't cause delays time-wise. But it didn't happen. And I can be quite confident in that, and we'll see that in the documents as we go further on. Okay, so the times here are significant. So you've got at approximately 06:29, Jen's vehicle was captured on a license plate reader at the intersection of North Cranberry Boulevard and Toledo Blade Boulevard, which is approximately 1 mile from Stephan's parents' residence, which I've blocked out. The vehicle is then captured on the same tag reader at 7:46. So he arrived around 6:29, he left around 7:46. And then at approximately 10:21, the vehicle hits on a license plate reader at the intersection of Rolling Oaks Boulevard and 192 in Kissimmee. And then you have 10:57, information is obtained that Stephan then arrives in Jen's vehicle to the hotel room in which they were staying, while the search warrant is being conducted on their residence. That's interesting. To me, that suggests that there's actually 2 lots of camera footage relating to the hotel, because the other part that we see, it refers to him entering the lobby at 11. I think that's the right time. We'll see that in a minute. So this is giving a different time. To me, that suggests that he arrived in the car park at that time, not necessarily in the hotel lobby. Specifically, especially because it says he then arrives in Jen's vehicle. Okay, so going back to the information about the storage unit, in the second paragraph here, the first just says what we've already said. The second paragraph here is where they initially think that Christopher's access code to the storage facility was manually entered into the keypad for entry 28th of... That date's wrong. It is right at the bottom of the page, 28th of February, at approximately 09:08 hours. Then the same code was used to exit the facility at approximately 09:16. Now remember that that code is for the gate, not for the actual storage facility. And you've got Christopher confirmed with Deborah that she had not been to the storage facility. And we've also heard him say that Deb doesn't know where it is. I wonder if that's true, but hey, I don't know if that's important, because we know that, well, that's probably a conversation for another day anyway, but we know that the storage unit was not accessed by Stephan. How do we know? First of all, we have reports by law enforcement saying that when they double-checked, it showed that he did not access, the code was not used on that date, but it had been used on the 16th. But also, look at the times. It says that the code was used at 9:08 and 9:16. Now, 9:16, for him to get from there to Kissimmee in a little over an hour, in morning traffic, totally impossible. He had to have left Northport around the time that the vehicle was captured on camera around 7:46 in order to actually make it back to Orlando in the time frame that he did. So it is physically impossible. Even we have the confirmation that the code wasn't used, but this time frame is physically impossible. You cannot travel from Northport to Orlando in a little over an hour during busy morning traffic. You're looking at close to being a 3-hour drive, given the information that we have. Now, before they were aware that he hadn't accessed the storage unit, they did get a warrant. They did enter the unit and they did do a search. And this is part of the warrant that was, or the request for the warrant that was done. Now I'm going to read you the first couple of lines, because that's all that we really need to worry about here. But, so the evidence sought through this warrant, the victim and or clothing that she was wearing, photographs of the scene, and any other implements or devices or evidence that could be used or have been used in violation of the laws of the state of Florida. Now, like I said, this warrant was done before they knew that he hadn't accessed the storage unit. However, this is really important. At the time that they did this warrant, they were aware of the images that he had on his phone. Hence the reason it says other implements or devices or evidence. So when they searched that storage unit, they were not only looking for evidence of Maddie, but they were also looking for digital devices. Anything that would connect to the case. They knew at that point in time that they were dealing with a P, and they knew, well, it is known by law enforcement that people like Stearns tend to keep images of that sort of thing indefinitely. So when they executed the search warrant, they were looking for digital devices as well as evidence of anything to do with Maddie's disappearance. Okay, I'm just chucking this page in here for anyone who is after screenshots, because this basically gives you the time frame laid out, and it talks about times when he was clocked as being in Northport, etc. So this is just there if you want to take a screenshot of it. Note, they couldn't access the video surveillance system for the storage unit, but like I said, that's irrelevant because we now know that basically he wasn't down there. Now I should probably mention, you'll notice all these documents are watermarked with Plunder True Crime. I'm happy sharing these because I actually paid for the 500-page document from Plunder. I actually since discovered that I could have actually got it free from 2 other creators, but I paid, and I paid a decent amount for it. So hence the reason why it's watermarked, and hence the reason why I feel comfortable sharing it, because I feel if I've paid for it, then I have a right to do whatever I like with it. Okay, so there's reports from a few different officers talking about the search of the storage unit. This one discusses it, says there was nothing of evidentiary value located in the storage unit. So this is very brief, but there's more that go into things a little bit more in detail. Okay, so this is the report that I think is the more important one to look at. And if we go down to the 4th last line, or maybe the 5th last line, it says, during the search of the unit, I did not locate anything of evidentiary value. More specifically, the unit appeared to have been well maintained and was not in a state of disarray, nor appeared to have been recently disturbed. Here's the important part. Inside were multiple boxes with miscellaneous items, none of which were pertinent to this investigation. This is why I said earlier on in the video I would like to be able to get hold of images from the search of the storage unit, because here they are saying that they opened boxes within the storage unit and that these boxes contain miscellaneous items, none of which were pertinent to the investigation. Why is that important? Think back to the actual warrant, or the request for the warrant. They were also looking for digital, any sort of devices that may link to the case. We know that in cases relating to images, that includes any sort of digital evidence. Did they overlook this hard drive that Chris Sterns supposedly found in the storage unit? Or was it not in the storage unit? And that's why I'm curious to find out if there are photos from this search. Because we have a search done of this storage unit, which we now know was not accessed by Stephan Sterns. We have the warrant saying that they were searching for devices, which would include a hard drive, if you ask me. We have this note here saying that they basically had looked inside the boxes and there were miscellaneous items, nothing pertinent to the investigation. And yet we have Chris Sterns discovering a hard drive in the storage unit. That's really interesting. Okay, so just confirmation here. Christopher's access code was not used as previously thought. And they also had a list for all users who had accessed the storage facility on that date, none of which appear to be relevant to this investigation. So it's quite clear here that there's no way Stephan accessed that storage unit. Time-wise, he couldn't have done it. Access code-wise, didn't happen. Even though the response to Chris Sterns when he was fishing for information was, well, the information on that is wishy-washy. Seems pretty clear to me. Okay, so the next couple of pages show the timeline, and you've got the 6:29 when he's caught a mile from the house. Here you've got 6:34 to 7:09 logged into Google at Christopher Sterns' address per FBI cast. Stashed in there in the timeline that blink and you might miss it. 7:28, Chris Sterns is seen leaving the hotel through the lobby. We know that he says he went to the business in Orlando. And then you have the vehicle on camera at 10:21, which would mean that he would have had to have, the time that the storage unit code was 9:16, it would mean an hour and 5 minutes from leaving the storage unit to reaching Orlando. Physically impossible. Nobody could do that ever. So that just verifies that he definitely did not access the storage unit. But like I said, they've already verified that the code wasn't used. Now, just to show you what I mentioned before, 10:50, Christopher Sterns walked into the hotel in Kissimmee. 10:55, 5 minutes later, Stephan walks into the hotel. So I'm going to now play audio from the phone call between Stephan and his parents, which occurred in May. And listen carefully to what's being said. And then I've just got one more thing to show you from the documents, which I find to be extremely interesting.
I came up Wednesday morning, met you at the hotel early in the morning, and is there some explanation why you left and went where you went?
I was driving around.
Okay, understood you were driving around, but they know where you were driving around.
Yeah. Well,
And we know.
Okay. I had wanted to grab a few things and get my ducks in a row, kind of prepare myself for whatever was coming, but I couldn't find what I was looking for.
Okay.
And then I ended up just kind of driving around aimlessly. Were you able to find my Social Security card?
Yes.
Good. I presume it was probably in that mouse toy box with everything?
I don't know.
No, it wasn't.
It's in my,
No, I don't recall where it was, but it wasn't. It wasn't there. But
I don't remember if you had confirmed or not. Were you able to find my watch?
No, we weren't.
Yeah.
So
there was no popcorn box.
So first of all, we have Chris Sterns. It sounds like he's nailing Stephan, saying they know where you went that morning. And we know where you went that morning. I'm wondering if it was him just nailing his son and saying they know and we've found out also, or if it was a warning, they know where you went, so don't come up with some kind of BS. But Stephan talks about he needed to get his ducks in a row and he needed to find stuff, but he wasn't successful. I think we know that he was successful. He did get into the house, he did log on to Google, and that hard drive went missing. But then straight after that, as the conversation flows, out of the blue, he wants to know about his Social Security card and his watch. Now, I thought that was really curious, and I think a lot of people have commented on this as well as being really curious, because we were led to believe from other interviews that Chris did, that Chris believed that Stephan had sold that watch, and that he had also sold his mother's watch, which had belonged to her father. Seems like this watch is super important, because even though he's in jail, he's probably never getting out. Stephan wanted to know if they had found his watch, and Chris said to him, no, they hadn't. And then there's talk about some kind of popcorn box, and Deb says there was no popcorn box. This was a really odd conversation, and I couldn't really understand. We do know that there were some conversations going on in terms of in the emails where Chris was saying, well, which things do you want me to sell to raise funds? And Stephan was saying, don't sell these things, sell these things. So maybe that's the train of thought possibly with the watch. But it just seems this watch keeps popping up for some reason, and it seems significant. So someone actually commented in one of my videos previously, because in this discussion something was said about, I wish we could, along the lines of, I wish we could talk about this face to face, and it was pointed out, well, it would be recorded no matter what. So we know that they are aware when they're having this conversation that in fact their conversations were being recorded regardless. So in view of that, someone had commented in one of my videos that they actually wondered if this conversation about the security card and the watch was some sort of coded conversation, something that perhaps had been discussed before Stephan went into jail, and that they knew what they were talking about, just we didn't. Because we know that Stephan didn't need his Social Security card in prison. Just seemed like a weird thing to be asking for it. And he certainly wouldn't be worrying about it for another 40 odd years. At which case, I would imagine that part of the process of him actually getting out would be, not that he will ever get out, but, you know, let's just go with that, part of the process for an inmate getting let out after so many years would surely have to be to re-access their social security, right? Now, I don't know if that social security card is relevant, but I find it really fascinating that they keep bringing up this damn watch. What is so important about this watch? And then, when I was going through these documents, I came across something which I found really interesting. Okay, so this is clearly from Northport, and it talks about how on April the 11th, this particular person had a message from Chris saying that he had an update on the case, and he phoned Chris, and Chris said he was cleaning out the storage unit he had on Executive Avenue. He stated he opened one of the storage bins and located a hard drive that would be normally housed in a desktop computer. In the same storage bin, Chris located a watch that Stephan previously told Chris during a phone call from the county jail was in his bedroom. Now, then this officer makes the supposition that Stephan must have gained access, or Chris stated that Stephan must have gained access to the storage unit. And then they talk about getting the computer, yada yada. But, now first of all, Chris knew on 11th of April that Stephan had not accessed the storage unit. He had been told that. He had had several conversations over that fact. And yet he's contacting Northport PD on the 11th of April saying he found this hard drive in the storage unit. But not only that, and this is the only place I found this, saying that he also located a watch that Stephan previously told Chris during a phone call was in his bedroom. Now, it's interesting because that phone call that we've heard was from May. We know that from the context of the conversation. So that means that there are other conversations, phone call conversations, that have not been released. And that was not the first time that he asked about the watch. So it just seems interesting that there is this obsession over this damn watch. And conveniently, when Chris Sterns happens to find the hard drive, it's with the watch. This could mean nothing. Could be totally unconnected. Now, I've said before, I have concerns about Chris Sterns' honesty because I've shown in a number of videos now where he's been less than honest. And I find myself wondering if this was all part of the plan. Chris Sterns had to have known that his son entered the house on that morning and that he removed the hard drive. Or at the very least, he knew that his son entered the house. Once he knew that the hard drive was gone, he had to know that his son had entered the house and removed that hard drive. But don't forget also, coincidentally, when Stephan went down to Northport, the keypad on the front door wasn't working. And Chris had just removed the modem for the cameras from the house. So there was no way of there being any digital evidence of Stephan entering the house. So, to me, it just all starts to stack up. What's the relevance of this watch? Is it relevant? Is it not relevant? Why is it something that keeps getting brought up? They speak in this telephone conversation about the fact that their conversations are recorded, and that even if they met in person, they would be recorded. So is talking about the watch and talking about the social security card, is that some sort of code referring to something that had previously been discussed before Stephan was arrested? Who knows? But it just seems to me that Chris Sterns has really pushed the narrative of the storage unit. He's trying to establish even that, well, he knows that that watch was in the house. He probably forgot that by saying that, he is essentially saying that he believes that, well, and same with the hard drive as well. After trying to distract from the fact that Stephan had been in the house, by saying that this hard drive that he found and the watch were essentially in the house previously, and that Stephan had used the computer just before leaving Northport, he is trying to establish that Stephan had actually been in the house, removed the watch and the hard drive, and put them in the storage unit. And yet he's being very careful to avoid discussing any possibility of Stephan getting in the house, and him and Deb are both adamant that Stephan couldn't possibly get into the house. I don't think he's realised that there's a big hole in his story there, because the only way that storage drive could have got into the hard drive could have got into the storage unit would be for it to have been removed by Stephan, Chris or Deb after Maddie went missing. You do the math. So, we know for certain Stephan did not access the storage unit. Chris knew for certain that Stephan did not access the storage unit. And yet, he keeps going back to it as his narrative that he's giving to the police. Even to the point of producing this hard drive that he found in the storage unit, along with the watch, which should have been in Stephan's bedroom. To me, it just seems like he has really tried hard to push this narrative. And it makes me wonder if he really was trying to distract from the fact that Stephan had actually entered the house. Hopefully I haven't totally confused you with this, but to me it seems just really interesting, this whole continual narrative towards the storage unit, while at the same time trying to make people believe that Stephan couldn't possibly have entered the house. It definitely seems like an attempt at a distraction to me. So if you're still here, thank you so much for listening. It's been a very long video again, I know. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit like. YouTube loves it when you hit the like button. And provided that the comments haven't once again been turned off, because that seems to be YouTube's favourite thing, please leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts about this. Do you think that Chris Sterns did help his son? And do you think that this continually pushing the narrative of the storage unit, when it's so clear that Stephan did not access the storage unit, do you think this was intended to distract from what actually did happen when Stephan returned to Northport? Because they do give another story at a later date relating to Stephan's return to Northport, and I will cover that in another video. So, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.